Ashish, and I'm joined along with Arish on this journey with you. I represent the customer experience engineering team, and we today will be talking about Purview Audit Service. As we dive into fascinating world of cybersecurity and audit, we'll explore the comprehensive suite tools provided by M365. At the heart of our discussion is Microsoft Purview, a family of solutions designed to help organizations manage, protect, monitor the data across various platforms. In today's session, we'll focus on one of the key components of Microsoft Purview, which is the audit service. We'll explore how it empowers you to maintain compliance, ensure the data integrity, and also gain valuable insights into what we are building and what we plan to release in coming months. Let's start by differentiating audit and Purview Audit Service. Audit, if you see, is a process, and this audit is an old process. It's not something new. So audit is a process of tracking and analyzing activities within any environment. This could include the action taken by users, by administrators. A lot of you would be in the admin roles and the work that you do, all of that getting logged, and then action taken by you getting logged, and automated systems such as file access or document modifications, any login IDs that you create, configuration changes that you do, either as part of troubleshooting or configuring new items. So all of that goes, and the process of tracking that is called audit. Uh, Purview Audit Service, on the other hand, offers a centralized store for auditing thousands of users and admin activities performed, and any activity that you perform across 75 plus Microsoft services, which are part of the M365. This centralized store is crucial for any organization if their goal is to effectively respond to security events or conduct forensic investigation. And one of the key features of Purview Audit is the ability to tap into events that are vital, let's say in forensic investigation, like I shared. Example is you could monitor the email item accessed or email sent by a user or user search activities. And a lot of these activities are helpful when you are working towards breach notification as part of various compliances. Additionally, Microsoft Purview Audit also allows you to preserve audit logs. A lot of customers, depending on which sector they come from, are required to preserve the audit logs for a longer duration, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and audit service comes handy to do that as well. So by leveraging Audit Purview, which we'll see in the coming slides, how can you create a robust and secure environment, as well as fulfill your requirements across compliance, troubleshooting, or other forensic business drivers. If I have to give you a quick view, if you go to the next slide, Arish, if I have to give you a quick mental model to see what audit service is, if you look on the left side, there are a lot of M365 services, and I would say these are different M365 applications, from Defender to MDE to MIP to PowerPoint to SharePoint, OneDrive, everything that we do in our digital life. So all the activities, whether it's done by software, whether it's done by human, gets logged into a service, which we call it as an audit purview service. And we give you various way to kind of query and check on this audit service. Now, let me take you to the world that we're living in the next slide, which really talks about, if we go to the next slide, Arish, the AI world that we are transitioning into. In the last I would say 1 to 2 years, we swiftly have moved into a AI world. And here we're talking of responsible AI in context of auditing. So let's explore how auditing in the AI evolves and our approach as a product team to audit, monitor, and secure the digital activities. Now, if you look, the traditional model, we used to focus on logging user activities such as sending email, deleting files, and all these actions were directly tied to a human performing an action on a system. So this method was fairly straightforward, and it relied on whatever humans were doing so that you could audit. To an extent, we were also auditing what operating systems were doing or any activities like replications that we had configured for high availability. Now, as we move into the AI world and things become more sophisticated over a period of time, the AI agents will interact autonomously or semi-autonomously with various other IT sources, whether it is creating a transcript for us, whether it is understanding the chat messages and then replying on our behalf, taking a permission, whether it is emails, which are aggregated and then understood, organization charts and more. So when we look at the AI world, the AI software itself could assess, analyze, and even perform actions on behalf of users, often providing proactive recommendations or suggestions or activities that they do on their own. Now, this shift is huge. It underscores the need of responsible AI, and along with responsible AI comes responsible AI auditing. So it's no longer sufficient to track what a human did. It's also critical to track what AI software or an application did and why it did a particular activity and why not the other, and log it all the way through the journey of the AI acting on its own. So which means it will involve scrutinizing the AI decision-making process, the context behind its actions, and by maintaining this level of transparency and accountability, we believe the Purview Audit Service will be extremely handy, and that's where we are transitioning into on a funny, or I would say a image note. If you see on the right, it just shows how the human is looking on the right, and on the left side you see the AI agent doing a variety of activities, which all is getting logged and then getting tracked by the human. If we move to the next slide, which talks about business drivers of audit service, pretty much as we spoke to customers across the globe, we could summarize that most customers were using audit service to fulfill their compliance and regulatory support requirements, uh, generating detailed reports to meet the requirements like GDPR or DPDP or HIPAA is not just a practice, but it is a necessity. And audit logs needs to be retained, retrieved so that you can present necessary data to the regulatory bodies. Let's also move into areas when customers have incidents and they really need to do a forensic investigation. Again, audit service comes as handy because it gives you a trail as to what happened in the past so that you can understand the kill chain and respond or evict the adversary, leveraging the audit intelligence. Lastly, we've been using audit service, and I would say the support team largely use the audit service when a lot of customers used to call us and say, hey, X service is not working, to check what's happening behind the scene. So moving into the drivers, if you look at the audit service provides a lot of golden elements to check what kind of activity and transactions are working behind the curtains. If we look at the next slide, which focuses, and I'm not going to drain the next slide fully, it's fairly with a lot of text, but I want to give you a quick glimpse into the sectors and critical role played by the Purview Audit Service. So if we look pharmaceutical or banking or government sector, compliances and regulatory requirements are paramount. What comes to mind is an FDA, if demands a comprehensive audit trail for every step that's taken during the drug approval process. And a lot of systems are either co-joined or built on M365. There's a lot of workflows and flow and documents which got approved. Then this company must track all the information and all the approvals to meet any of those acts. And that's where audit service comes into play. The Purview Audit Service also addresses the challenges by building a comprehensive audit trail so that in the event of troubleshooting, or as I said, forensic analysis, you're able to respond better and you're able to gain the visibility better. What I like now to do is to introduce Arish. Welcome, Arish. Arish is a product manager of the audit service. He's both the mother and the father of the audit service, the Purview Audit Service. And Arish, why not we listen from you? What all are the latest development? What all have we released? And what's the journey forward on the business drivers that we just spelled out? So over to you, Arish.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ashish. Thank you for the introduction and for setting the context of audit. Hello, everyone. Thank you once again for joining this webinar. My name is Arish Ojaswi, and I'm the product manager for Microsoft Purview Audit. I'm joined on this call with Nitesh from the engineering team, who will be assisting us with Q&A in the chat. So please feel free to continue posting questions on the chat, and we'll answer them through the meeting and also at the end. Okay. To start with, I'll now give you a walkthrough of the audit search experience, and we'll do this using an example. So consider a scenario where a security admin is looking for this data. What they want is they're looking for all audit logs, all instances where somebody within their organization deleted a file between 5th and 10th June. So this is a simplified example, but we commonly see such requirements as part of monitoring or any security investigation that takes place, where you need to look for a needle in a haystack, where you're looking for a specific log in a vast ocean of audit logs. So to get started, you open up the Microsoft Purview Compliance portal and navigate to Audit. Once you're here, this is what the screen will look like. Now you can go through these filters one by one and enter the values that are relevant to the data that you're looking for. So once you're done with entering these values that are relevant to your search request, you press search, which is the blue button at the bottom, and that submits your audit request. So walking through the example, in our scenario, we were looking for logs between 5th and 10th June. So we'll select the dates from the calendar like so. Once we've done that, next, there is a field called activities. So activities refer to the user activities whose logs you're looking for. So if somebody deletes a file, that corresponds to a file deleted activity. So there's a search and drop down available on that filter. So our example was, like I said, for file deleted. So we'll select that activity from the drop down. Lastly, we have the option of giving a name to the search request that we're submitting so that it's easy for us to find the search job later on. So for this example, let's call it June file deletions, which is highlighted in red. There are also several other search filters that you may have noticed on the screen. For example, at the top right corner, there's users. Users allows you to search for logs of specific users only. Similarly, below that, you have file, folder, or site, which allows you to search for activities which are relevant to a particular folder location or a site location or a file. Record types and workloads are a collection of similar activities which are grouped together so that it's easy for you to find them. For example, all file operations would be part of a single record type. So this would include everything ranging from deleting a file, creating a file, modifying a file, copying, etc. So once you've filled in all of the relevant fields for your search, you click on search to submit the request. Once you do that, it creates a search job which gets added to the queue. So if you look at the bottom half of the screen, you'll see highlighted in red that there's a new search job that has been created. Currently, the job status says queued. Once this job is started, it'll say ongoing, and there's a progress bar which will range from 0% to 100%. And once the status is complete, you can click on the search job to get a list of all audit records. All right. So as we saw early on, and as Ashish had explained, retrieving audit logs is just one part of the audit solution, a major part, yes. But there is also a second part to it, which is retaining these audit logs. So Purview Audit also supports retention of audit logs through custom policies, which allow you to decide how long you want a certain audit record or a certain category of audit records to be retained for. There are certain default retention policies which apply based on the type of license that you have. For example, if you have an audit standard license, which comes with an E3 or an E3 equivalent license, then by default, your logs will be retained for 180 days. So audit standard does not grant you access to custom retention policies. So any audit standard customer only has access to 180 days of retention. Audit Premium, on the other hand, is the higher tier offering, which comes with an E5 or an E5 equivalent license. Audit Premium gives you access to some additional logs, additional activity insights within some of these logs, and also it unlocks longer retention for you. So if you have an Audit Premium license, then your default retention for these 4 workloads, which is Entra, Exchange, OneDrive, and SharePoint, the default retention for these increases from 180 days to 1 year. The default retention for all remaining logs stays at 180 days. However, Audit Premium also unlocks custom retention policies for you. What this means is that you can now create custom policies to increase retention of any logs which are outside of these 4 workloads. You can increase the increase the retention of these up to 1 year. So you create custom retention policies. You select what kind of logs you want that policy to apply to, and we'll see this in a bit in subsequent slides with an example. And this allows you to change the retention all the way up to 1 year. You can also, if required, reduce the retention period for any of these Entra, Exchange, OneDrive, and SharePoint logs as well. Lastly, there's also an add-on license SKU, which is a 10-year retention SKU, which you can purchase if you are an Audit Premium licensed user. What this does is it unlocks retention policies up to 10 years. So your defaults remain the same, but the custom policies that you now create go all the way up to 10 years. Okay, let's look at that example I promised you to understand these custom retention policies better. So in this scenario, let's assume I'm an E5 licensed user, which means that file operation logs, which are part of SharePoint, they have a default retention of 1 year. However, I have purchased that 10-year add-on. So now, because of this, I want to set the retention of these file deleted, file copied, these type of audit activities. I want to increase the retention of these logs from 1 year to 5 years. So while this is an example scenario, there are certain regulations in the EU region which require financial institutions to retain certain types of audit logs for, say, 5 years or 7 years. So this example is sort of like a simplified version of that same requirement. Okay, so let's see how to set this up. So from the audit screen, I can navigate to retention policies. I can do this either by selecting policies on the left panel, which is highlighted in red, or by selecting audit retention policies at the top. By clicking on either of these, it takes me to the policies screen where I can see a list of all custom policies which have been created for my tenant. Now on this screen, I can click on create audit retention policy at the top, which is highlighted in red. Clicking on that will open up a panel on the right side of the screen with various options which allow me to configure the custom policy. So if you look at the first image on the extreme left of the slide, over here, I start by giving the policy a name and a description so that later on, if me or somebody else is looking at it, they understand what that policy does. I can then choose to apply this policy to a specific user or a set of users. In my scenario, I'll leave it blank so that it applies to all users. Below that, I can select the type of logs for which I want to create the retention policy. So in my example, if you remember, I was interested in SharePoint file operations. So I've selected SharePoint file operation, list item operation, and list operation, which are the relevant record types for this. Next, if you look at the middle image, there I select the duration of retention. So in my example, I wanted to set it for 5 years. If you remember, by default, this stays at 1 year, but in my policy, I'm now increasing it to 5 years. So I'll select that in the duration dropdown. Lastly, on this image on the extreme right, I will set a priority for this policy. Now, priority is a useful property in case you have many custom retention policies. And if 2 or more of these policies are overlapping and they apply to the same audit record, then the one with the greater priority takes precedence. So in this scenario, I've set the priority to 20, but you could adjust it depending on what the priority of other custom policies in your tenant are. Once I'm done configuring these, I'm going to click on Save. And now I can see the custom policy which has been created. That's the one at the top highlighted in red. Any new custom policies that you create or any modifications that you make to existing custom policies, these can take up to 48 hours to take effect. And these changes are always forward-looking in the sense that they only apply to new logs that are generated after the custom policy was created or a policy was modified. You cannot change the retention of older logs or historical logs. All right. Okay. Now that we've had a good refresher of what auditing currently offers, let's look at what some of these recent releases are, which have happened in this space. I'll start with the 30 new audit logs that have been added to audit standard. So as part of this change, we identified 30 audit activities which are critical to security investigations. So these 30 logs were previously part of audit premium, which meant that you needed an E5 or an E5 equivalent license to get access to these logs. However, we realized that some of these or all of these logs are very critical towards a security investigation to identify what happened, to identify the scope of impact, and often to mitigate the incident as well. So now these 30 logs are part of audit standard itself. This change was actually part of a wider effort by Microsoft to provide increased security visibility to our customers. And this was done at no additional cost. So now anybody who has an audit standard license, they generate these 30 additional logs, which are present across Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, Stream, and Viva Engage. As part of the same effort to increase security visibility, we've also increased the default retention period of audit standard logs. If you remember the table that we saw earlier in the presentation, where if you have an audit standard licensed user, their logs are generated by default, generated and retained by default for 180 days. That wasn't always the case. Until November last year, the default retention was 90 days. We realized that this was not sufficient for many investigation scenarios because typically the average time it takes to detect a security incident can range around that same period, about 80, 90, 100 days. Sometimes it can take even longer. So there was a very narrow window available for customers to investigate these incidents, and therefore these logs were not becoming very effective since their retention was constrained. So this has now become much better with a longer retention period of 6 months, 180 days. Again, this change was done at no additional cost to audit standard customers. You do not need to purchase any add-on for this. This is something that I find quite exciting, auditing user interactions with AI. So one of our major focus areas over the past few months has been to ensure that as adoption and usage of AI grows, we want to ensure that data governance of AI keeps pace with this. We've introduced new audit events called Copilot Interaction and AI Interaction, which capture details of any user interactions with AI models. So the audit log will help you answer questions like who interacted with the Copilot or who interacted with an AI model, where did that interaction take place, what was the actual interaction. Now, the actual content of that, the prompt text or the response text, is not part of the audit record due to privacy reasons, because the actual prompt that a user types is considered user-generated content, and we do not keep any such user-generated content within an audit record. However, you have identifiers for these prompts and response content, and you can access the actual content through e-discovery, which is one of the sister services of auditing, part of Purview itself. So you have other questions like during the interaction, did Copilot access any internal files or public web data in order to generate that response? And were any of those files which were accessed by Copilot or the AI model, were any of them sensitive? Did they contain any confidential information and so on? So this is a rapidly evolving field, and as more and more products infuse AI with greater and more mature capabilities, we aim to continue to enrich these logs further so that data governance stays on pace with rapidly evolving product. Up next is managing audit permissions from the Purview Compliance portal. This was a major inconvenience which many customers wrote to us about. Previously, the roles required to access audit search had to be configured from the Exchange Admin Center, even though audit was part of the Purview Compliance portal. We've now brought these permissions within the compliance portal itself so that you don't have to open up a separate portal. You don't have to go all the way to the Exchange Admin Center to manage permissions and assign access to Audit Search to new admins who join your team. Now all of that happens within the permission section of the Purview Compliance portal itself. So as you see in the screenshot, that's what the permissions section, that experience looks like. Previously, these permissions, audit logs and view-only audit logs, were controlled from the Exchange Admin Center, and now you have them within the compliance portal itself. One of the methods to programmatically access audit logs, as we saw earlier in that example, is through that UI. Sorry, one of the methods to do it through the UI, we saw that example earlier. There are other methods to programmatically access these audit logs, and one such example is the Search Unified Audit Log partial commandlet. Whenever you run an audit search query over a very large scope, and typically we find that programmatic use cases do submit search requests over, say, 5 months, 6 months. In such scenarios, the queries tend to take a long time to complete and return the search results. There are scenarios where you only want a few audit records and you may not be interested in, say, an exhaustive list of search results. So that's where the high completeness toggle, which has been introduced to the commandlet, that's where this toggle becomes useful. So when you set this toggle to false, it allows you to run the query faster, but you'll only get a subset of the results. On the other hand, there could be scenarios where you want an exhaustive list of all search results, typically as part of an investigation rather than, say, an exploratory search request. So in those scenarios where you want an exhaustive list of all search results, you set the high completeness toggle to true, and the query will take longer to run, but you can be confident that you'll get an exhaustive set of search results. Custom retention policies, we saw a little bit of this in the introduction earlier. When custom policies were first introduced, we only had support for either 1 year or 10 year, which were the default for, say, an E5 and an E5 plus add-on scenario. You could not select any durations in between. And so this change was rolled out last year in December. And now with this, it allows us to select shorter durations like a retention policy of a week, a month, 3 months, 6 months, or even longer retention policies like 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years, which is what we saw in the example earlier. So the process here is the same. You go to your custom retention policy section, and from the duration dropdown, as you can see highlighted in red, you can select any of these additional values in between. And then you set a priority for your policy, you click save, the retention policy gets created. Admin units is a feature which is present across the entire security and compliance solution. It allows you to divide your tenant into multiple smaller units. So this division could be based on, say, a specific geography, or in other scenarios, a specific team or specific functions. So for example, you could create an admin unit for German users, or another admin unit for your finance team, your HR team, or say a separate admin unit for vendors who may have access to your network. So within auditing, admin units allows you to scope a particular admin's access to audit logs as well. So for example, if you look at the screenshot at the top, if there's a scoped admin who's part of, say, a German users admin unit, then he or she will only be able to access logs of users within that admin unit only. So if you have a German admin unit and an admin is assigned to that scope only, they cannot go and access audit logs of, say, a French user or an Italian user or a user from the US. So this is what's shown in the first image. If you look at the dropdown as well of the admin units filter, the scoped admin will only be able to see the admin units that they have that they are part of. Similarly, if you look at the second image, you can see what the experience looks like for a global admin who has access to all admin units. A global admin would be able to view a list of all the admin units in that drop-down filter, and they'll also be able to view the audit logs of users across all of these admin units. So this allows you to scope access to audit logs as well, just like how you would scope access to files or say admin unit supplies and DLM retention as well. Okay, that wraps up the recent releases which we rolled out. We'll now look forward and talk about what is coming up in the near future in this space. This is a summary of what's currently being worked on, and we expect this to become available over the next couple of months. We have a few improvements on existing capabilities as well as new capabilities being launched, and I'll dive deep into each one of these. So the Audit Search Graph API is currently in public preview. Just like the partial commandlet that we spoke about earlier, this Graph API also offers programmatic access to audit logs through the Microsoft Graph, which is a unified endpoint for any Microsoft service related data. So we're viewing this API as a better alternative to the partial commandlet. The Graph API also allows you to scope an admin's access to specific workloads. For example, if you want one of your admins to only have access to SharePoint logs, or if you want them to only have access to Exchange logs. Typically, we see this in customers where they have separate teams to investigate different areas or different silos, rather than one horizontal team which is having access to all logs across the tenant. So in these scenarios where you only want a specific admin or a team to have access to Exchange logs only, that is now possible for the very first time with the Graph API. So it's already in public preview. You can check it out, you can start using it, and it's planned to become generally available in August. Blanket custom retention for all record types. So today, if you want to change the default retention for all of your audit logs. So in the earlier example, we saw setting a default retention, setting a custom retention for file operations or SharePoint related audit logs. But if you want to change that default, so if as an E5 customer, my default is 1 year, but I want to change it and set it to just 6 months for every single audit record type, that currently is a little bit cumbersome. The way to do it is you need to open up that custom retention policy section. And in the dropdown where you select various record types of audit logs, you need to manually add each and every single record type to the list. So we realized that this wasn't a very pleasant experience. So we're adding the option of selecting an all option there, which will automatically include every single record type that exists today, as well as any future additions that happen, any future record types that are introduced into auditing. So say hypothetically tomorrow there is a new service launched within Microsoft whose auditing has now been included as well. You won't need to manually come back here and add that record type to your custom policy. By enabling all in this section, you'll ensure that any future values also automatically get added. So this image that you see at the top is just a placeholder, but the experience will be very similar to this, where you can just enable all and it'll handle current and new future values as well. So this is planned to become available in August, and we'll be sending out communications about it accordingly. New filters in Audit Search. So at the start of the presentation, we looked at what the search experience looks like within that UI. Within that same experience, we're now adding 4 more search filters to make it easier for you to find relevant logs quicker. We often find scenarios where customers filter out certain audit logs and export that data offline. And then on Excel or some other data management tool, they apply additional filters to further scope down the logs that they're looking for. This typically happens because there's always going to be a finite set of filter options that can be offered. However, we want to make it slightly more comprehensive so that your need for say post-processing on that data reduces to as much extent as possible. So the 4 additional filters that we're now introducing into this experience. The first one is record ID, which is a unique identifier for each audit record that gets generated. So this is a GUID value for record ID. The second is user type, which identifies whether the primary actor who generated the audit record Was it a user? Was it an application? Was it a policy? Was it a system triggered activity? So user type allows you to differentiate and identify what was the type of the primary actor who generated that audit record. The third is user key, which is an identifier for that same primary actor. So in this scenario, if it is, say, a human user like you and me, who goes and deletes a file or creates a file or sends an email, then user key is an identifier for you or for me, whoever sent that. So this would typically be the Entra object ID for that particular user. In case of applications who are performing activities and generating audit logs, it would contain the corresponding app ID for that application. The last one is client IP. This particular field generally becomes useful in, say, forensic investigations, where you have identified or flagged a set of IP addresses which are exhibiting, say, anomalous or potentially malicious behavior, and you want to further investigate all of the logs specific to just those IP addresses. The way to do that currently was to take a much wider scope and export out, say, millions of audit records, and then you do your filtering offline, which meant that you probably have to wait for a longer period of time for these search results to be generated. Now, that is going to be a much better experience when you can directly filter out within the audit experience using client IP directly. So all of these 4 filters will become available as part of the UI search experience, as well as programmatic access, say, through Graph API. This feature, these 4 additional fields, are expected to become generally available in September. The last one that we have in the list is new logs for audit activities, or as I like to call it, auditing for auditing. So currently, when an admin searches for audit logs or exports any audit logs or manages, say, retention policies, makes any changes to custom policies, these activities do not generate any audit records. So you have an admin who is monitoring and looking at what are all the activities happening within the tenant, but there's nobody monitoring that admin's activities. So we wanted to close that gap. So with this work, we'll now start generating audit records whenever somebody runs an audit search or exports an audit, exports any audit logs, changes admin settings, and so on. So this will become available as just like any other audit record. So the admin will be able to export, view, search for these audit records as well. Now, by nature, audit records are immutable. So any of these activities, they can never be deleted or purged, even if, say, there's an admin who has access to audit records. An audit record, once generated, it stays within the system till its retention period expires. So this feature, this auditing for auditing, is planned to become available next month in August. So this deck contains a links to all of the various roadmaps for these. So in case of any communications or any changes, those public roadmaps and those communications will be available. All right, this wraps up the update from Microsoft Purview Audit. I hope you found this session useful, and we would love to take any questions that you have. Jason, if there's still any questions unanswered in the chat, we can go over those.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much. We do have, the team has been great with answering all the questions, but we do have a few. The first one is, are there any considerations for masking sensitive data that is stored in the audit log?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically, whenever there is any sensitive information that gets marked as PII, at the time of log generation itself, we ensure that sensitive information should not get included within an audit record. As I'd explained in that in the auditing for AI scenario, user-generated content like prompts that you write in your interaction with AI, these don't get included. The actual content of emails, these don't get included into audit records. Access to user-generated content or say content within emails, files, messages, all of these fall under the purview of e-discovery, which is another solution. The permissions required to access that content are different from the permissions required for audit search. So a typical audit admin with just access to auditing would not be able to access any of this sensitive or confidential information, which is part of the user-generated content category.
Great, thank you. The next question is, do these audits also include admin changes across Azure, Intune, Defender, etc.?
That's right. There is a category of, there's a record type dedicated to admin activities across Entra, OneDrive, SharePoint, etc. Within the public documentation for auditing, there's a list of activities and list of services which are audited. We can share a link to that in the chat.
Great, thank you. The next one is, what is the relationship between Purview and Sentinel? Do we need both, or would either suffice?
Good question. I can take a stab at it, and then perhaps Ashish can also add in. So Purview is primarily a data governance tool. So if you look at Audit serves as a source of data for Sentinel, where you have your threat hunting and your primary investigation. Ashish, is there something you want to add?
Yeah. So I think I can add to that. So if you look, Purview is part of M365, and Purview focus on data. It focuses on data security, it focuses on data compliance, and it focuses on data governance. Sentinel, on the other hand, is a SIM tool. A SIM tool will ingest the logs, correlate them. It will ingest the audit logs, not just the operational logs. It will also ingest other logs and then comb the security logs out of it and then present a view. So Sentinel will not just ingest logs and comb security logs from M365. It will also ingest logs from your NIDS and HIPS and networking devices and cloud services and other third-party services, including firewalls and AVs and EDRs. So Sentinel is completely different. It offers a different value. It performs a different job. And you could say the audit logs which you see in the M365 world, including the Purview family, including the Defender family, can also be further triggered into Sentinel for other security analysis, hunting, correlation activities.
Great, thanks so much. The next question, the next question is a little long. So if you need me to repeat it, just let me know. It is, as E5 license comes with the audit premium, which included a default 1-year free retention logs. If we create a 7 years retention log policy, is there an additional cost that comes with the 7 years retention logs? If yes, what is the cost?
Sure. So if you just have an E5 license and you have not purchased the 10-year add-on, you will not be able to increase the retention beyond 1 year. So E5 license grants you access to audit premium, where the retention is capped at 1 year. In order to get access to 7-year retention, you would need to purchase the 10-year add-on, and then you would have to create a custom retention policy where you can choose the logs whose retention you want to increase to 7 years.
Great.
There is also, about the cost aspect, there would be no additional cost except for what you're paying for the add-on SKU.
Great, thank you. This next one is asking for clarity on the admin audit trail.
I'm not sure I understand the question. If the question is about an audit trail for admin activities, that's something that's coming up. So if you have an admin performing activities within the audit experience, that is going to get logged. On the other hand, if the question is about auditing wider admin activities across, say, Entra, SharePoint, we covered that as part of the first question, wherein you have a specific record type for any admin activities that happen, say, on Entra, where you're managing permissions, managing access to certain files, or say, creating custom roles, adding other users and removing users from roles. So that is already part of auditing.
Okay, thank you. The next one is, many audit log entries are attributed to a system rather than a named user. How does the licensing for 10-year logs work for these?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer top of mind. I can check on this and circle back to you.
Okay.
There is a
great.
certain logic that applies here, but I'll have to check and get back.
Great. And then the last one that just came in was, how about Microsoft Defender? I learned that the Microsoft Purview is the current version of Defender.
Ashish, do you want to take that?
No, so yeah. So Microsoft Defender is a family name, like you have Office. So in Office, you have Word and Excel and PowerPoint. So when you look at Microsoft IPG license, or if you look at Microsoft M365 license, it has a Defender family and it has a Purview family. So they're both different families. So when you have email security, which is MDO, you have MDE, you have MDI. So all of them are part of the Defender family, which is a separate family, focuses on security. But when you move to Purview family, it has, as I said, 3 pillars: data security, which has MIP and DLP. Then it has data compliance, which has Compliance Manager and DLM and RM. And Audit as a services, and then you have data governance, which has the governance, Purview governance, which earlier used to be called as Azure Purview. So both are different family, both have different services with a different, I would say, goal, and they complement each other, and they package together in E3 and E5 variety, or if you can purchase them as IPG or other available licensing SKUs.
Great, thank you. And then we did have one more that just came in. It is, when doing a search in audit logs, if you do not specify a name or user, does it search all users?
That's right. So the default is all. If you specify a particular user set of users, it will filter out logs of only that. If you leave it blank, it searches all users. Similarly for file, folder, and site as well. If you leave it blank, it searches across all locations.
Great. And again, another one just came in. So what was used before Purview? It seems Purview is pretty new to the market.
Ashish?
Yeah, I think the name Purview is new, but MIP is a couple of years old. DLP as a technology is a couple of years old. What Microsoft did is added this prefix Purview to the names, and then logically kind of collated them into a Purview family. So Purview is not new. The name Purview is new, but some of these services are old. And then we've added some more capabilities to the old services and added a service on data governance in the family, added Compliance Manager as a new service relatively to the family. So in short, Purview is a prefix name. It has list of services which are there. Some of them are old, some of them are new, and I would say all of them have new capabilities that we keep releasing every semester, which is every 6 months.
Great. And then another one came in. I've got a question with regards to Microsoft 365 backup. Does the audit log have information about the policy creation, data being chosen for backup, and data being restored from Microsoft 365 backup?
Just give me one moment. I'm reading through the question again. So if the question pertains to, say, file retention policies from DLM, those are part of auditing. But specific to backup, I will have to circle back on this. I'll have to check if this is already part of audit.
Okay, great. That seems to be all the questions that we have. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Ashish and Arish, for being our guests and for sharing the great information with our community. Also, thank you to the Q&A team who helped us with answering the questions and providing the resourceful information. To all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/security community. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. Also, please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security-webinar-feedback. For those of you who may have additional questions on the topic we just covered or other product-related questions, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/Azure Purview Community. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.